I think he came out drawing because my mother tells the story of when he was in public school that she was upset with them because they talked about how well he drew, but she wanted him to be educated, So she took him out of public school and put him in Catholic school.
He was admitted to art school and design as a high schooler and excelled there.
That's a school where the teachers and instructors, they always encouraged people's creativity. And one of the tests that he had to take it was more like a test to see how an artist thinks. And his instructor said, we're going to do slab sculpture. So he was presented with a flat slab of clay, and he had the freedom to do whatever he wanted with it. So he wound up sculpting an elephant out of it, which was really quite beautiful.
When he was in high school, I think it was 1969, he had an art piece in the Studio Museum, which is, if I'm not mistaken, it was a sculpture piece of two dolphins. I remember that from when I was in school, And that was a long time ago.
Both of my uncles actually went to Vietnam, and my grandmother petitioned the government to let at least one of her kids out. When Barry came out, he took the time after the service to travel abroad with a traveling semi-pro team that allowed him to see places like Germany and Belgium. And it actually inspired some of his artwork you see through some of the landscapes that he saw that he was blown away by.
He also excelled in his abstracts.
Burst of reds and fuchsia and mauve, and his color palette was broad.
He was comfortable with that contrast and also giving you a gradient of color, and that in each one, you always see something different whenever you look at the painting.
I pretty much figured that he was an abstractionist just by his personality, and not that, some people refer to abstractionists as people who are like, it's kind of a version of organized confusion, right? But in a lot of the work, I saw serenity.
He kept company with some of the most amazing abstract artists that we know.
I've known Barry since meeting him at the Jack White exhibition at my gallery. And he came to support Jack, who was his neighbor in his building.
I lived in the building for 35 years. Sometimes we get each other's mail in each other's mailbox. Just began to know a little bit about him over time.
He always referenced jazz, and he said he listened to the music while he was painting.
He lived on the first floor, and I live on the first floor. So if I heard music, I would knock on the door. He's always busy with his paintings.
In the late 90s, early 2000s, he participated in exhibitions at Cinque Gallery just above Midtown, Tilton, and he was amongst his peers.
Very often, the art market wants to pigeonhole you, if you're Black, to do art where the subject is Black. That wasn't him.
Most Black artists in our community, they draw from the passion of life that they experience.
The audacity for him and his peers to paint non-figurative, non-representational work when that was counter to what the market might be requesting.
Product of the art world of the 50s, Ed Clark is from the Action Painting School of Thought. Now, in case you don't know a lot about art,
Ed Clark
what that
saw him
means
as
is
a
when he
peer,
walks across his canvas,
and Barry was helping out, Ed was his friend. Ed had asked him to help him, clean up some of his old paintings. And, Barry agreed, and wanted to help him. Ed respected Barry as an artist and knew that he could trust Barry to handle his paintings in an appropriate way. And he said he used a cotton ball and a solution with a little bit of Windex, and he would gently clean section by section his paintings. From that, that point on, a lot of times people thought of him as, oh, well, he was Ed Clark's helper, as if he wasn't an artist in his own right, and it was insulting. I don't think they gave him his due, and I don't know. It's like he almost wasn't part of the club.
I had a phone book of some contacts that Barry had, and they were gallerists.
A woman who I met through Barry, Eugenia Foxworth, she might have been the only Black woman who had an art gallery in Midtown. She championed Barry. She saw something in his work. When he was at my show, he invited me to his one-man show at the Ken Kelleher Gallery downtown, which was owned by Joe Overstreet and Corinne, his wife. The whole show was spectacular. It was room after room of his large paintings, his smaller works. I believe he also had some work at the Swan Auction House, which was also a gallery, and they champion African-American artists.
A number of the galleries have opened and since closed over the years. That Renaissance era of creatives inspired me throughout my life. So Harlem is the Mecca for a number of things, especially for creatives. It's important that these galleries exist. Lewis's gallery, my gallery, Heath Gallery, S.E. Green's gallery is reopening, Studio Museum of Harlem reopening.
Dorothy worked with Harlem Restoration, which managed the building. She managed 3 properties, 270, 124th Street, 304 and 305 on 133rd in Amsterdam. Most of the people in here are here because she took a lot of pride in taking care of her own people. As far as Barry was concerned, since he was an artist and he was struggling, so to speak, because he was in the service, but whatever they gave him for being in there wasn't a lot. So she supported him in that way. He was able to get a studio apartment for his artwork on the 1st floor. And as far as I know, he lived up on the 6th floor. So he would be able to go downstairs to do what he had to do, but still stay in the building, and it would not have been possible if she had not given him the space or the opportunity to develop his style.
And was Dorothy the only one who saw what he was doing in the studio day to day?
I don't know how often she went down there. She just kind of left him to his space,
So the first time I saw Barry's work, And you know, I didn't see it in person. He never invited me to his studio to see his work. He wasn't that type of person. A lot of artists would say, hey, I want you to come take a look at my work. Barry he didn't do a lot of self-promotion, at least not to me. And I know sometimes when folks go to exhibitions, it's kind of like, hey, I'm going to support this artist, but I'm getting some networking in. And I just never found that about him.
And also the internet wasn't as big a thing. Like, we didn't have Instagram. But I told him, I said, you need to have internet presence and or a place to put where your art can be seen. He knew he was good. But I think he expected people to come to him. And people aren't going to necessarily come to you. You have to go to them.
Barry has always been somewhat of a quiet person, unless you knew him. To me, he never boasted about anything. He just was who he was. You know, he didn't bother people, and people didn't bother him.
Even though he was a really good-looking, very suave, debonair type of guy, but it was just not a whole lot of unnecessary words.
Everybody sort of like kind of knew Barry, but didn't know a lot of things about Barry, like he was a painter and things like that.
All I know, he had a proliferation of work, and that it wasn't until I came back up here to live in 2012 that I really saw what he was doing art-wise, and even so, I didn't know the breadth of it until after he passed.
I realized that because it was an unexpected passing, that he did not leave any real instructions or any real person in charge of his paintings. I felt an obligation to preserve and try and garner as much of the work as I could. I reached out to a lot of people who were in my uncle's Rolodex and people who had connects with him from the past, and really lobbied to them, like, hey, look, I've got some paintings. If you want to go check them out, I'd be willing to if you can just hold them or put them up or put them on display. And I couldn't really get anybody to do anything because, quite honestly, people are, New York, people are busy, people have schedules. And then one day I get a call out of nowhere from this gentleman by the name of Louis Long, and he goes, hey, I heard you have some paintings in the city, and that they might be gotten rid of. Is there a way for me to see them? I'm like, yeah, sure, definitely. I'm like, what kind of time are you on? He's like, what are you doing right now? I said, well, I'm not actually there, but they're in New York. He said, well, we're in New York. I'm like, well, on 123rd. He said, I'm on 123rd. He came over on a Thursday to get the paintings, and the apartment was going to be cleaned out by Friday.
Louis came along and, gathered them up so they wouldn't go into the trash because we didn't have space to put it. So, and I want to thank Louis Long for giving Barry giving Barry's art a place to live. As he was probably as complicated as some of his artwork.
I'm excited to present for the first time his works that in many cases have not seen by his neighbors or many of his friends, and to add another powerful voice and body of work to this great conversation.
I'm sure that he probably was looking forward to this studio museum opening back up on 125th Street.
He was a fine artist to the core, and I'm glad he was allowed to be that all throughout the years, ever since he left art and design.
I just really hope that this exhibition is well supported and that Barry's legacy is elevated far beyond what he could have ever hoped for.